Hey, welcome to ShedTalks. This will be our inaugural video, just to kind of introduce the concept. Basically, ShedTalks is really just regular, thoughtful, experienced people sharing their thoughts and ideas and observations and conclusions on issues that are critical to us all in some way, or meaningful. I want to keep it pretty broad, philosophical, political, whatever is motivating for people. The term ShedTalks comes from a guy by the name of, his channel is called Bow of the Fifth Column, I believe it is. And he just happens to have his videos in his workshed, looks like. And I thought, boy, that's a really great idea. Initially, just because you can get away somewhere and be able to focus and not have interruptions. You know, you hear sounds off in the house or whatever. That's kind of difficult. So, yeah, I should do that too. And then I thought, well, it's really cool how this guy's sharing, his thoughts on things, and his thoughts on things are really very insightful. And he's not a media person. He's not. I mean, it's not only not commercially driven, like Joe Rogan's got a really good podcast that doesn't have that sort of corporate slant to it that we all love so much. But just more of that, the better. The more I think we hear from real people. And I'd also like to give a lot of credit to my cousin who started a private Facebook group that's really just kind of word of mouth. And I guess I won't share the name of the group because people will look for it, but you should start one of your own. You're kind of more thoughtful inner circle, and certainly not your echo chamber, but particularly people who are open-minded and thoughtful about things tend to not shove away people who don't agree with them all the time. So I really like to keep a group of friends that, I can count on them to see an issue differently. But not, usually not obnoxiously. They've really got a very thoughtful reason for why they see it that way, and it, even if they don't change my mind, discussing it with them really makes my argument stronger if there's an argument involved. But if nothing else, it gives you perspective, and having the perspective of people that have shared their lives or their thoughts or whatever with you is just incredibly valuable. To be able to, to a certain level, be able to see something, from somebody else's point of view. That's not just another person, but somebody who's inherently has an experience that you couldn't have. I really value knowing people, particularly people that are, I'm not afraid to call me on my shit. So I think this will have some of that. It's really going to have shock absorbers. So I think the way I'm planning on getting it started will probably suffice for that. And what I'm going to do is share this with people I know, share this channel. What I'll suggest to you now, particularly if you don't have a channel, if you've just got some ideas and you feel like, for a number of reasons, one that I have that I started doing some of these for was my wife got sick of listening to so much of it. Get to the thing and do it, But the thinking out loud part, it's an audience of one that's not that interested in it. So she suggested some other channels that I've done. So I want people who are just sort of like, I'm sitting there talking at the television. People in the room aren't that interested in what I'm saying, but I'm like, this is an issue. This is wrong. This is how I feel about it. Or here's what we've got to do about it, or whatever. You've got passionate thoughts that there's probably an audience for. And so I want to facilitate my primary goal. It's a place to share my thoughts, of course, too. But I think what'll work is that I believe I can allow for it. I'll find a way if I can't, because I'm a hacker. For you to just leave a link to your video in the comments. And if I like the video, I will click like on it. But if nothing else, people who, for whatever reason, as the channel develops, for whatever reason, people find me, whatever I've done to draw people there, in the comments, they're going to find you too. So even if you and I don't have enough of an understanding or overlap, and that's not likely, because if you've got a reasoned thought, an idea, even if it's very opposed to mine, I would really support that. But you'll have in the comments, the only thing I'd ever pull, of course, is something that's making fun of or being prejudiced against people for something they were born with. Whether you believe they were born with it or not. It's not welcome here. People's bad choices, political, those are open season. People have chosen to go down that road. They've earned that. If they haven't chosen to be a race or a sexual preference or even a gender sometimes. So if you haven't figured that out yet, you probably need a more remedial channel. No offense. No, be offended, I don't care. So I want you to leave a link to a video. Try one on. Do 10 minutes. 10 minutes is good for YouTube. Timing for you. And the fact that you've left it on my channel will get people on YouTube, so that's already a benefit right there. But particularly if I already know you and I know what your content's going to be, initially the people that I already know will be the first. But as I find members or subscribers or commenters, I'm not going to hit the end. You all know how YouTube works. If I get to where I'm bringing values, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. But no, this is the first video, so you can ask me that idea. I don't think I will. You'll figure it out. Anyway, so up from people commenting, I want to review videos, shout out to people, feature them. I'll have to look into where I can do stuff on the channel. I don't know if I can offer a playlist of best of or something like that. If I can share out a playlist of other people's videos that I have at work today. Those are dirty. Part of ShedTalks. After you've gotten your hands dirty, after you've had a little bit of your beer, you sit down and talk to your friends from all over. That's what we're here for. So I want to try to find some way to really feature people, and then of those people, particularly, of course, initially people I know, but one of the many aims would be to get to know more people. The thoughtful, intelligent people that I do know are some amazing people, but a handful. I'm not a super social person, so I have friends from the 80s that are in this group. So we could use some more, and some more perspectives. There's some age limitation in that too. So, but I want to escalate from that, from just featuring, pointing people, giving a shout out. Yeah, I watched this one. It was just really cool. You should go watch him. Here's the link to it. Those fancy things. But I want to figure those out. But then I also would really love to have some podcast style videos. I would be ideal if I could hook up actually a way to do that with on a regular basis with friends and family. There was kind of a video chat room like I've got at work that I could do a live cast. I know it seems like this. I'll have to look into it. I know cobbler shoes. I'm a geek. I should know all this stuff, but it's just so much stuff in my line of work. So I'm just aware of it. But yeah, I'd like to get to that where there's some discussions, and I think most of the time I'd really kind of prefer one-on-ones. Have a good long talk with some of my friends and make new ones that way too. Maybe somebody that's got some crossover and it's like, hey, I've seen you're doing on this stuff, and I'd like to have a chat with you about it. That'd be really cool. But really, in my I don't know, one of those about things or whatever on the channel, I put that, and I've decided this. I don't know. I think it's one of those self-evident truths that the real aim of the internet, if you really distill it all the way down to what it means, just a stir and then might not be something. Try the cherry tree hanging over. And I'm sorry that I didn't start in the shed, but your shed can be whatever. Your car can be your RV. A little place you run away to. So you have these sort of podcast conversations. Have those be live. Oh yes, the promise of the internet. Sorry, it was a rat. Sorry. The real promise of the internet was a conversation. If you really boil it down, and it only became so much more clearly aimed at that when the web came into being in 91. I've met Vint Cerf, who's one of the authors of TCP/IP. That's the beginning of the internet. 71. Yeah, right, a year after I was born. Those of you don't know, I think it's about 91. Around my middle son was born. Switzerland, Tim Berners-Lee. Basically wrote a couple protocols. What hosts the page and what interprets the page into, it just kind of made the internet a lot more useful. I only say that from that perspective because I was online in 84. Or mice. No mice, no hard drives. BBS boards, that kind of thing. So, that's what I want to try to achieve with this, because I feel like there's been a lot of inroads to that, social media, not the least of which, but really everything has been sort of commoditized, into not just sound bites. I mean, I really love the connections that I have with people on social media. A lot of people really panic and have a lot of stress around it, but for me, I'm able to just really take the good and leave the bad. But it's difficult to have a conversation, and other people get in on it, and you're filtering what you're saying based on the current audience in the comment zoo, and then there's a lot of misunderstanding, and that's the worst of it. So I feel like when social media starts to break into a conversation, actually, that it starts to break down. It's extremely beneficial to give you a sense of you still live in the small town you grew up in, and on your way to work, you bump into your mom, 2 friends from high school, and your roommate from college. Because you're all from the same place, you all live there, it's 1812. It gives you that, I sit down first thing in the morning, get my coffee, that up, oh hey, what's going on, dude? I'm in high school. Far away, my mom, another state. So it's nice for that. So it's that passive sort of, how you doing, Frank the doorman, and more. But when it gets to be much more, I really think understanding breaks down. I think people try to come and go from the conversation, and it's not a focused conversation. I think that's where I really want to get with the podcast-ish thing, is I'll probably talk with people about something I did in high school called seminar that was based on the Paideia program. Say that, but it's kind of it's a formal way to have what is technically called an argument, but it's really a discussion, a true discussion, which is not just talking, but potentially disagreeing. But it's very formalized, and the key elements are that, the first stage is that everyone agrees on the subject at hand. So oftentimes there would be, reading. Not so much like a book club. It would be like, read this specific kind of thing, not necessarily a whole book. Sometimes it would be. But it was a thing that had some thought value to it. And very often, a good seminar would put together with the second half, which is, usually a modern idea. Okay, now that you understand, and we all agree what happened and who said what about this thing in the French Revolution, and this political leader and his way of thinking that led people to what they did then. Now we all agree what was said, what the perspective is. So we're coming from the same point of reference. We're not all just coming from whatever we were raised with to think about this and so. We're going to read through a thing, we're like, okay, so now we all know what's on this. Okay, now you take Napoleon and you plunk him down in New York on 9/11. What's his take on what to do? How does he lead? And then of course we want to defoo for what about him being startled by modern technology? So make up a story for how that's gotten around. Traveled forward in time and or been brought forward in time and has been here for a few months. So he knows what's going on, but he's going to be kind of thrown at this event as like, what did you do, man? Then you have a discussion. Now the way we had it was people would actually watch, but it's interesting that this would have a lot of that actually. We had to do that just because a number of people were in class. But there was only 15 people allowed in the conversation. I think that would be way too many for this podcast. I'd really prefer one-on-one. Sometimes, maybe you have to have a dozen people for that kind of tempo, but have that kind of conversation, and it's like, okay, now we all, agree on this thing. I know how you think, but and I know we're not going to agree, but how would you do this kind of thing today, or how would you think this person would do that? And the exercise really, there's some truth that usually comes out of it, but what's more interesting is that you learn more and more how the people in your group think. You start to get to where you know what arguments they're going to have, and not just, I know he's a person that always favors that kind of thing, but you actually kind of go like, I get the thought process. I can see the reasoning, the perspective of that person, and you can adopt that. You can get to where you really can very well say, all right, I'm going to put my so-and-so kind of person hat on. Okay, looking at this child care situation from that perspective, here's the reasoning. You can come up with a valid opposing argument, which is extremely useful. I work in the legal industry, and so coming up with the other side's argument at time is very valuable. So I hope we can achieve some of that. And that's sort of the peak, and it's sort of the simplest level, and genuinely just the simplest. At the least, I think it's the simplest is going to be probably the most widespread. I just like the idea of kind of having a loose rubric and a place to share. And a loose rubric, my only desire is for it to filter out that which would repel the kind of people that I'd like to have. I don't want to run off people who are thoughtful and have good ideas. So if you're immature, stupid, offensive, instead of a really long list of rules, I just play God. my channel. But it'll be fine because, of course I'm going to take the opinions of others, and I'm really forgiving. I'm really too forgiving. So if anything, I will err on the side of letting too many obnoxious people know. So don't worry. But and it's not an in out. I feel like, the more valuable I see an idea, even one that is opposed to mine, and I, those of you know me, I do it all the time on Facebook. It's a well thought out idea, thought process, perspective. It's worthy of sharing because it raises the intelligence. I have a lot of friends who are support opposing political candidates, for example. Most of them aren't that thoughtful about it. I don't know if that's right. You're just kind of on team whoever, and you kind of just put up shit and go. That's basically what I'm avoiding, and I'm not calling those people out at all. I'm just saying, hey, the few of you who actually go, I'm not just gung-ho about this person. I actually have some reasons behind it. I think this is, better because of this, and so even if it's like, I just can't see that. I appreciate that you've really given it some thought. You're not just regurgitating a meme, and I want to hear it, and I want other people to hear it. I want people's consciousness expanded. I want the promise of the internet. I want a conversation that is meaningful and brings the true value of this mechanism out, which is, and I really think Tim Berners-Lee probably, the web came about probably because he actually had the vision of this ideal conversation, not my conversation, but the notion that once somebody has uncovered something scientifically, which was where he was coming from, they've uncorked some part of the combination. There's a process in the scientific community for disseminating that information, testing it, replying to it, questioning it. They've got this machine that just knows how to, hey, if you come across something, we know how to chew on it and get it to its greatest good, or the primary mechanism is disprove it. That's right off the bat. We'll set off to disprove it. Keep trying. After a while, you start to go, boy, this theory really it does a good job of sticking around. It's invalid. So yeah, he wanted to speed that up effectively. Think about publishing papers and who's going to read it and when does it show up at school, and then when are students thinking about it. Sometimes it's a generation later that the next sort of line of thinking comes through having studied one discovery and builds on that. And I think he saw very clearly, wow, if that conversation could happen outside of space for one, but also it'd be really nice if it could be in some ways outside of time. We do a live broadcast of this, and it's recorded, so people can consume this at a different time too. But with those synchronous asynchronous communication mechanisms, the feedback loop. You imagine Joe Scientist makes discovery A, and it's like, well, that unlocks one problem, that still leaves us this, or it's added this other problem. But I don't know how to solve that, so I ask my community. You can imagine if Ask My Community was immediate, and that's what we have now. I've got a community of loosely IT people, friends and former coworkers, that are fairly accessible, and I don't think there's any area of technology that's not covered within I'm a data analyst. I look at it, and my scope is that 24 hours. If you needed, if my boss, and this has happened, would say, hey, I need an expert opinion on, how do you get military grade this, encryption or erasure, or disruption, or whatever. And I can reach out to my network, and within 24 hours, I have a definitive answer from somebody who's a credential expert. It's that, I promise. Now, imagine a theoretical physicist who says, that adds up, but now this doesn't. If they could just go, hey, other theoretical physicists, look what I found, but, one of them is like, oh, yeah, hey, bounces back to the group again. If it takes, if you were watching, if you haven't, go grab it. It's called Connections. Burke, I believe. So that was the guy's last name. It's kind of a PDF thing. I think for the longest time they probably moved it over to the Learning Channel or whatever. But yeah, it was called Connections, and it was a thread between, usually between ancient and modern. One of his more famous ones was part of the space shuttle design was determined by the width of a horse's ass, because you got to go back to Roman times, 300 BC, chariots, and he connects all these dots to where, and that's why the shuttle's like this. It's fascinating. But some things, he makes an interesting story out of it. Some things like that, though, are, the history of the transistor, and, not that I know the history of the transistor, so I'm probably picking the wrong subject, but, some really important inventions have taken these fits and starts and this process of sharing and solving new problems over decades. And some of the acceleration that we're seeing now is because that communication loop is so much shorter. And that has been leveraged in scientific capacities and commercial capacities, I think, quite well. But I don't think in personal and philosophical ways. I think we've forgotten to continue to evolve socially, culturally. And of course, for the longest time, everybody kind of just had religion to tell them this is how you are to be. But we live in a country of a lot of different religions, and myself, non-religious. So, there isn't a singular rubric, and even if there was, there's some flaws to that system. If that's your only guide, and have some of your own rhetoric too. But we've stopped having the conversation. That's my primary goal with ShedTalks, is to go out to your shed and contribute to the conversation. That's what I'm asking for. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope this is fun.